Welcome Internet to Psychoanalytic Talk, and today we're going to be talking about the mature sexual love, which is the third chapter in Otto Kernberg's book, very good book, might I add, Love Relations. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this chapter, it's because fundamentally in psychoanalysis we spend a lot of time talking about what goes wrong, or what is complicated, or what is abnormal, or what is statistically rare, but we don't talk necessarily a lot about normalcy of when things go right and when things work out fine. And this third chapter is fundamentally this. It's the love relation in all the goodness that it can bring to the individual and to the couple. So I found that very interesting, and that's something that I wanted to talk about for many weeks, but haven't quite found the time to talk about it. So now is the point where we're going to have a nice and long-ish conversation about it. So what is very interesting in this chapter is that basically for Otto Kernberg, when he presents it, he presents the love relationship as something that's very dynamic. It's not at all something stale, something that's a foregone conclusion. It's something that's very intertwined with the relationship itself. And for him, there is a dual phenomena happening. There is a sense of heightened individuality within the relationship, a separateness, but it's also counterbalanced by a unification in which the self loses the boundaries during the sexual relationship. A sexual relationship that, of course, is paramount to the couple, but it's also a representative of the whole dynamic of the relationship. As for him, sexuality and relationships are intertwined. Of course, it's something that can be debated when, for example, there's asexuality and so on and so forth. But in the case of if there is a sexuality, it amplifies the couple's relationship, and it's in a way a microcosm of the couple's relationship. Because for him, a mature sexual relationship and a mature relationship is not the fact of not having aggression, because that's something that's part of us, it's a drive, so it's there even at our core. But it's the fact that through the relationship, it can be transcended, it can be gone beyond and integrated with love. And that's the whole point of a sexual relationship for Otto Kernberg, or a mature one, is that everything becomes merged, but merged not in this delusional, psychotic way, but in that, linkage, in this sin. For me, the idea that comes to mind is that a mature sexual relationship is a bit like a tapestry. Every part of the ego comes together in a somewhat unifying way. He calls it the oneness. It's a very important and I feel very interesting concept. I was even debating with myself to title the video and talking about the oneness as a concept. And I think it warrants its own video. But fundamentally, the idea is that unity, that oneness that is felt within the relationship is something that is going to allow the individual to connect, but to connect on a deep level, and not just to the other person, even if that's what's happening, but to the whole of mankind and the whole of humanity. Otto Kernberg in this chapter presents a man that's a professor and that went to the Louvre, a French museum, and he was in love with his partner, and he found a statue, a Mesopotamian statue that was a representative and was very familiar in terms of shape to his partner. And he felt a sense of connection both with the sculptor that lived thousands of years ago and to humanity as a whole. So for Kernberg, the mature sexual relationship opens up to humanity itself, and not just to the partner, even though the partner is the primary person that receives that connection. And that connection is also binded by the ideal, but it's not a fundamental ideal that wipes everything out or that provokes splitting. On the contrary, it's an idealization that allows for aggression to be integrated. Because basically, the ideal is the fundamental idea that when there is a penile penetration, even in homosexuality, but the penetration itself is the fact of going into the mother's body, but not necessarily just as an aggression as it could be seen without love, that it's domination. For him, it's an exploration, it's the discovery of the mystery of unification, because you're literally in someone and someone is in you, and the fundamental mystery of even if you're in someone, their consciousness remains always separate. So you can see that there is both unification and there's a fundamental alternation of boundaries, and on the other hand, fundamental separateness, but the separateness is non-destructive, meaning that the person is not destroyed by it, and neither of the partners are destroyed. They transcend that separateness that becomes fundamentally acceptable and linked with the unification. In a way, it's as if the unification forces of the mind, of going back to very primal infancy, of the skin, of care, of even breastfeeding, all of those things get unified with and tolerate the separateness of the individual. In a way, it's as if fundamental forces that are opposite during mature sexual love come together and become not necessarily together, but they become tolerable to be integrated within the same space. And that's something that I found very, very true. That sexuality, when it's becomes a pleasure, when it's taken into a mature form of loving, can open up, can broaden the scope of what patients experience, what they live, what they feel, and it can be a fundamental force for a better organization of their lives, of their fundamental relationships that they have, and not just with the partner, but with other scopes of their being. That's something that I found very interesting and very true, that the mature sexual love isn't just the act of having sex. It's much more than that. It represents something of a longing within ourselves to be connected with someone else, and connected at a true and deep level. And he does say that in those moments of fundamental connections, the boundaries of ourselves dissipate, and we fundamentally go into a more oceanic feeling, as Freud put it, as a feeling of fundamentally belonging with the other and fundamentally being with the other, without the other becoming us, or without us becoming the other, but we're connected. In a way, he resumed it, I think, fundamentally with that concept of oneness. That's what it is. We are feeling unified. We are one within ourselves, with the idea that the other one is one with us, but is also them. And that's great, meaning that it's not about domination anymore. It's not about destruction. It transcends those elements. Of course, he doesn't say that in the sexuality, in the sex act, there is no excitement, or no using the other as a sexual object, or an object of sexual excitement, but it goes beyond that, because basically it's linking the person with the excitement, rather than having the excitement on one end and the person on the other. And he said that basically for him, the orgasm is the fundamental moment of where the psyche and the body reach out together, as a fundamental unification of both biological drives for the orgasm and the psychic dimension of unification. And he says that basically, even if there is no correlation between having an orgasm and being in a mature sexual relationship, often with people that can't love or that have issues with loving, that orgasm is not liberating, it's not beautiful, it's frustrating, it's a bit annoying, it's a limit to the erectile power, or to the, how can I say, or in case of women, a limit to fundamentally give an orgasm to the other, because that's how it also is. It's when you're in a mature sexual relationship, it's giving something and receiving it and accepting both. And if you're not in love, if you're not fundamentally able to love the person at that moment, well, then having an orgasm is a testament to a form of care. And that's something that might annoy people that don't love, because they don't want to show that love or that care, or that the other is able to provoke that in them, that's something of a weakness. So there's that very interesting dichotomy of what's the purpose of orgasm in mature sexual love and in psychopathology. And I found that very, very interesting, that fundamental dichotomy, which seems to me to be quite true, as often people with psychopathologies use sex as more of a discharge. It's not about unifying with the other, it's about evacuating something, evacuating stress, evacuating tension, interest, subjective conflict. It's about proving something to oneself. But it's never about fundamentally being with someone, to love someone. It's about trying, in a way, to avoid something. And he also points that out at the end of the chapter, which is fundamental, I think, to understand the core differences, is that in mature sexual relationships, the orgasm, the fact of being with the other, is going to unify the individual. It's going to put him and her on a way in which they can connect to others, not just to the partner, but to who they are, to humanity. With someone that has relational issues or love issues, they don't connect. That sex is just a discharge of drives. And I think that dichotomy is a very important one. It seems to me very clinically true. That one cannot, even though it's the same process, orgasm that's happening, it cannot and it should not be conflated between an orgasm that's a discharge and an orgasm that's binding. And that's something that I found very, very interesting in the conception of Otto Kernberg, because fundamentally I think it's very clinically accurate. And I also found it very interesting that, in a way, love is a way to also, that relationship is a way of trying to change certain anxieties. That, for example, the anxieties of transgression, of the Oedipal complex, or even earlier paranoid schizoid, sorry, French is schizoparanoid, so I always mix them up. Paranoid schizoid phases are integrated within a sexual relationship, and they're overcome thanks to the sexual relationship, because all the aggression becomes, in a way, transformable by love, because love allows those destructive elements, and instead of rejecting them, it integrates them and shows to both individuals that no one is destroyed, no one is belittled, no one is fundamentally hurt, but on the contrary, that there is something, a surplus of something else, that something else being love in the fundamental way of what this means. And as a last and final note, he, in this chapter, explains something very interesting, that love also integrates not just hate and destruction, but also sadness. And the ability to feel sadness is intertwined with love, as the fact of the relationship moving forward, the life struggles, all of these things are also integrated. They're not, made easy, they're made easier by the whole relationship, and how the mature sexual love relationship holds the framework. And he even says something that I found very interesting, that if you prevent children from grieving, from saying goodbye, it hurts their ability to love. So in a way, loving is also giving up. And I found that very, beautiful, but also very clinically interesting, even though it might not be as easily seeable as other senses stated. But nevertheless, it's so interesting. So that pretty much sums it up. I hope you found the video interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.